George Eustice heralded the liberating experience of leaving the bloc and urged fishermen to keep faith with the government as Theresa May brings control of UK waters back from Brussels to Britain. For years the European Union has meddled in British fishing waters. The Secretary of State for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Defra said today, Mr Eustice told Express.co.uk he was excited at the chance of finally regaining control of Britain's waters for the first time in decades. And the MP said farmers and the agricultural industry will also benefit from Brexit, with the option to remove stifling EU rules. Speaking at Defra in London, he said, "It's been quite a liberating experience, the decision to leave the EU, because it means whole swathes of areas, most notable farming and fisheries, two very big totemic EU policies are going to go. Get it, the UK is finally freeing itself from the EU's fishery laws." George Eustice has declared, "We have this rather bonkers system." George Eustice are going to be replaced again with domestic policies. "It's the first time in half a century we're going to be able to apply ourselves in a creative way from first principles." He hit out at the EU's farm subsidy system, describing it as bonkers and stifling. Mr Eustice said, "We are looking at moving away from the subsidy system we have now. We have this rather bonkers system which rewards farmers based on how much land they own, so the biggest payments for support go to the largest and wealthiest landowners. At the other end, the farmers that perhaps need it most get the least. Get it. The EU currently restricts Britain's ability to determine who fishes in its waters," said EU regulations on farms were not a pretty sight, resulting in bizarre and petty rules holding back Britain's farmers. Mr Eustice said, "As a farming minister here I've wrestled with EU law for 4 years and it's not a pretty sight. Stifling nature of the rules and regulations around the common agricultural policy, dictating what the minimum width of a hedge is, the maximum width of a hedge, rules about what width a gateway can be. It goes on forever," and he urged fishermen to keep the faith in the Brexit process, despite concerns EU laws will initially be enacted into UK law. He said, "Fishermen are a very sceptical group of people. They all supported, almost down to the last man, leaving the European Union. They knew that the common fisheries policy has been a disaster for fisheries industry." Thursday, January 25, 2018, a fisherman from the French city of Boulogne walks past burning tires blocking the access to the port of Boulogne-sur-Mer. "But the key party, I say to them, we have to keep our heads on this. We have important negotiations ahead. But international law is absolutely crystal clear that when we leave the EU we become what is called under UN law an independent coastal state." He said this means the UK will regain exclusive access to the waters up to 12 nautical miles out from the coast, as well as power over who fishes in an area up to 200 miles away. Mr Eustice said, "Whereas at the moment the vast majority of our waters are dubbed an EU resource, and the EU literally does negotiations on our behalf, claiming our resources are the resources with the likes of Norway and the Faroe Islands. In future we'll be conducting those negotiations ourselves. We'll be determining who has access to our waters, and we will be in a very strong position to say we want a fairer share of quotas where we don't get a fair share at the moment." George Eustice told Express.co.uk he was delighted the EU's bonkers regulations are nearing an end. He said any transition period would see EU laws enacted into UK laws, but said they could be removed at any time. The minister said, "That's about providing continuing so people know where they stand. You would then have freedom to change that after time. If you decide a particular regulation that governs what type of net is used to catch haddock should change, we will be free as an independent country to change that." Earlier this week, Environment Secretary Michael Gove also heralded the future of British fishing and farming outside the bloc. He said, Mr Gove said, "It is undoubtedly the case that some policies integral to the EU, such as aspects of the Common Agricultural Policy CAP, have done damage. During our membership there have also been actions for good, particularly around environmental principles and governance. We see this in the attention paid to high standards of biosecurity, cleaner air and beaches, and the protection of certain wildlife species, yet one of the main reasons why I campaigned for the UK to leave the EU was the long-term harm inflicted by the CAP and the Common Fisheries Policy (CFP). Both have been reformed in the time, but neither properly put the environment first.